Okay, I think I'm going to start. It is just 3 p.m. Paris time. So, hello everybody. You're very welcome to the webinar today. This is a joint webinar that's being organized between Forus, the organization I work for, and Bridge 47. And Ricardo is here today to represent Bridge 47 and will be presenting a little later. So you are very welcome to this joint webinar. This is the first time that Forus and Bridge 47 have organized this kind of capacity development event together. We're very excited about it, particularly from the Forus point of view, because we do engage in a lot of advocacy at national, regional and global level. We're a global network, a global civil society network, and our members comprise 69 national development platforms in every region of the world, and 7 regional coalitions. So we're very engaged with Agenda 2030 or the SDGs, and we focus mostly on Goal 16 and Goal 17 of the agenda because these goals are considered transversal goals in the sense that we believe that their implementation has an accelerating impact on the remaining goals in the agenda. So these are the main focus of our advocacy activities. But more and more members are showing an interest in the idea of global citizenship education. They're aware that this is something that has become quite a concrete target since it was included in SDG 4. And so the target 4.7 deals with global citizenship education. So our hope as Forus today is that we learn a lot more from our colleagues working in Bridge 47, working on global citizenship education. We're very fortunate to have 2 very good speakers today, who I'll introduce later on. But for the moment, I would like to just mention some practicalities, and then I'm going to hand over to Ricardo to tell us a little bit about Bridge 47 and its work. So on the practicalities, I'm going to ask everybody please to turn off their cameras, their video cameras, and you should be on mute also because it does help to prevent background noise from interfering with any speakers. We're also going to take minutes and we're going to video record this meeting. So we will send you on in the coming days a copy of all of the slides that are presented here today, also minutes of the meeting and the video recording. So you'll have plenty plenty of materials afterwards to be able to use, I think, in your work going forward if you decide to engage more deeply with global citizenship education. We would encourage you, if you have any comments to make during the webinar, to please put your comments in the chat box or your questions in the chat box. And you will have an opportunity later in the call after the speakers have spoken to engage you know, in discussion. We have quite a bit of time allocated for that. So please feel free to either raise your hand if you know how to use that function on Zoom, or alternatively, you can put your question in the chat box. I'm going to be the timekeeper for the call today, or for the webinar today. So I'm going to be quite strict with speakers and others about keeping to time. We will have a Zoom poll early in the call. This is like a very small poll to just establish your views or opinions on certain issues. And we will also have a poll question at the end. And both of those questions we'll be asking you to complete them during the webinar. And finally, we will have an evaluation form at the end of this webinar that we'll share with you in the chat box. And if you can complete, it's a short, easy to complete evaluation form. If you can complete that before the end of the webinar, we'd be very grateful to you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ricardo, who is working with Bridge 47, who's worked in a very kind of supportive way with us in getting this webinar up and running. And Ricardo is going to explain to us who Bridge 47 is and the kind of work they do. So Ricardo, delighted to hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Deirdre, for your kind words and for your wonderful cooperation in setting up this collaborative webinar together with us. Yes, as mentioned, I am working for Bridge 47, but as well for the International Council for Adult Education, where we have one of the main speakers here on today. So what is Bridge? What is Bridge 47? So we are a bridge, a network by 15 European, but also global civil society organizations. The head and the lead organization is based in Finland, while we have various organizations all over Europe, but as well international organizations like the International Council for Adult Education and Civicus and IADI. And what we are aiming to do is what we do here today. It's bringing people together, learn from each other, and share experiences and views with each other, with the aim to contribute to a transformation towards global justice, doing this through Global Citizenship Education, GCE. So you will be hearing about GCE quite often today. Yes, and what we're aiming for is very ambitious, is to achieve peaceful, tolerant, inclusive, sustainable societies. So, and we are doing this with 4 pillars. So what do we do? What does Bridge 47 do? The first pillar is, yes, a global network. We coordinate and build up a huge global network committed to promoting GCE, Global Citizenship Education. The second pillar is advocacy and changing policies that reflect the role of Global Citizenship Education in achieving sustainable development. And we do this at the national, European level, but also global level. Thirdly, it's about building partnerships, and this is also what we're doing here through this webinar with Forus, because we want to work with organizations that have previously not maybe not worked with GCE, and make them and work together to bring new practices together and reach also new target audiences. So building partnerships is a key of Bridge 47's work. And also, again, today what we're doing is capacity building, capacities to be innovative, and also using innovative ways to build capacities and increase capacities. And one aim is also to then challenge maybe sometimes our assumptions and explore new ways of doing. So that's what Bridge 47 is about. And Deirdre has already mentioned that we also would like to get to know you a little bit better right at the beginning, and also to be to make sure that you're becoming active today in our webinar as well. So we would like to start a little poll now. So I'm asking our colleague Arturo, who's so nice and kind to support us technically today. So you should see a poll now. It should be popping up on your window. So we are wondering, on a scale from 1 to 5, how confident are you about your understanding of SDG target 4.7, which connects to global citizenship education? So please choose on the scale from not very confident 1 to 5, very confident about how you feel about target 4.7 and global citizenship education. We know that many of you might not be working in the education field and maybe have heard about it for the very first time. Some of you might have been working with GCE already or have maybe heard about it. So yes, curious to hear where you're coming from and what your knowledge about GCE is. So I don't know what's the percentage of participants. Okay, so I think the poll has closed already. So we are waiting for the results to be published. Great, thank you, Arturo. And how we can see, yes, well, we have a wonderful average here. So 42% think that, yeah, it's somehow confident, yes. 42%, 4% said, oh, not confident at all. So we are glad to hear that. So, but there's still 8%, who think, yes, I know what GCE is about. And I'm sure that our presenters and our speakers today will pick up on this poll, and this will also be a very good base for them to adapt their input very spontaneously, maybe to your confidence level on GCE. Thank you so much. And now I'm handing over to Deirdre again.
Thank you very much, Ricarda. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the two keynote speakers that we have for the Global Citizenship Education webinar today. And the first of these is, he has a very long name if I read out the full name, but I'll call him Robbie because that's how I know him, Robbie Guevara. He's with the International Council for Adult Education and Bridge 47 and is actually speaking to us today from Australia, where I believe the weather is quite cool. So Robbie, I'm very happy to hand over to you. Can I say to the participants, if you are struck by anything that Robbie is talking about and you want to make a comment or ask a question, you can use the chat box while Robbie is talking, or when he is finished, I'll also give an opportunity for anybody who wants to seek clarification or make a point to do so. So Robbie, over to you, please, and you have 15 minutes for your presentation. And can I ask anybody else to turn off their video camera, please, just so that the connection will be better. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can I share my screen? Okay.
Yes, Robbie.
Okay, can you see the full screen now?
Yes, perfect.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. It's 11 o'clock here in Australia. Good morning to different parts of the world. So my name is Robbie Guevara. I'm originally from the Philippines, so kamusta to the Filipino in the room. Okay, so just to get us going, well, I'd like to acknowledge an acknowledgement to country. I'm a migrant in Australia, so I would like to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nation whose unceded lands we conduct the businesses of the university where I work. I respectfully acknowledge your elders past, present, and emerging. But also I'd like to acknowledge that the work I share comes from a work that I've done initially with Melbourne University, Plan International here in Australia and RMIT University, but also through the work that I've done with global and regional and national civil society organizations in the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, and within the region here in Australia. You were all invited to a pre-webinar survey that was conducted. We had 177 the last I looked in terms of people registered for this webinar. We've had responses for around 62 of them, and so we will use these actual responses in the structure of the webinar into the three parts. So the main parts really, I'll give some background on SDG 4.7. Good to know that there's a majority of people who have some confidence in 4.7. And particularly, I'd like to talk about what competencies makes us global citizens. Where and how did we learn these competencies? And then in what ways have we applied this? So there's an aspect of the concept, there's an aspect of how we learn it, and then there's an aspect of the practice, and then I will conclude. Okay, so in terms of just a brief background, you'll all be very aware, as Forus members, that SDGs were adopted in 2015. One of the key things that we, as in the education sector, was very keen about is that we have one goal, which is SDG 4, but it's not just about primary schooling or high school, it's about lifelong learning. And so this is a major achievement for us. But aside from that, aside from having lifelong learning, the other aspect that I'm really happy about as an environmental educator, as somebody keen on global citizenship, is Target 4.7. Okay, because Target 4.7 has these two elements of global citizenship education and education for sustainable development. Two things that I am very, very much committed to. And so global citizenship education, or GCED, is not actually new. In terms of the SDGs, it actually came from primarily the work that the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon did in 2012 in terms of setting up the Global Education First initiative. Okay, and part of that was a commitment to transformative education being at the heart of the social, political, and development agenda. And so it included education that fostered global citizenship. And this was one of the driving forces that got global citizenship education in Target 4.7. Okay, aside from that, for those in the northern coalitions or northern members of Forus, I think it's important to acknowledge there will be roots of global citizenship education in what was called development education. In the 70s, the northern-based or governments, but also the northern international NGOs, were committed to raising public awareness and understanding to support international development. So in a way, there are a number of interpretations of development education, but at the heart of it is an awareness raising about global poverty, to learning about development issues, to a framework for broader learning that has active and change components. So if you look at it, just try to remember the elements here. There's a conceptual aspect of an awareness about global poverty. There's a process about learning, but also this process is about active engagement. Because this will be important when we start to look at what global citizenship education really is about. One of my arguments also around where global citizenship education comes from is around the Dolores Report in 1996. The Dolores Report, or what is called Learning the Treasure Within, was a UNESCO International Commission headed by Jacques Delors. And the main contribution of the Dolores Report were two things. One is learning throughout life, which is lifelong learning. And the second is the 4 pillars of learning: to know, to do, to be, and to live together. And so this, I would argue, actually also has seeds for global citizenship education. It's important to note that the learning to be came from a previous report of UNESCO in 1972 called the Forus Report. Both reports continue to be important in conceptualizing education globally. And so just to visualize learning, the 4 pillars: learning to do, learning to know, learning to be, and learning to live together. Recently, because of the Sustainable Development Goals, but also in terms of the Education for Sustainable Development decade, we have added transform oneself in society. So it's not just to learn to do, to know, to be, and to live together. There's this aspect of education as a transformative power. And so now I go to the first, our survey said, if you know those, Asho. So what knowledge, skills, and attitudes characterize a global citizen, and how confident are you? So it's very similar to the poll we just had. Out of 62 respondents, there were more people in the poll who said that they were confident about what knowledge, skills, and attitudes are of a global citizen. And when you ask them, do you have these knowledge, skills, and attitudes, or I will call them competencies? Interestingly, people said 92% said, yes, we have these skills and attitudes. So we're starting from a base, a high base, I would say, where people have a general awareness of what it means to be global citizens, and people have not just an awareness, but they have it within themselves. Let's now look at some of the definitions of what this knowledge, skills, and attitudes are. An attempt to try to say, because if you look at the literature, all of them will describe global citizenship differently. Okay, the Brookings Institute pulled together 88 key people around the world, and they formed what they called the Global Citizenship Education Working Group. And they identified these key competencies of empathy, critical thinking, problem solving, the ability to communicate and collaborate, conflict resolution, sense and security of identity, universal values, respect for diversity, and recognition of the interconnectedness of global issues. It's a long list. But more interestingly, as they scanned what was available in terms of the different definitions of governments, of NGOs, but also in terms of grassroots groups, they found that there were 3 things that were common, and 2 of them would be found in most of the definitions. First, it's about the capacity to identify, understand, or evaluate global processes, problems, or challenges, and the effect of individual actions on global issues. I would say this is the holistic thinking, critical thinking, ability to integrate things together. So it's conceptual. Second is about values, a value to human rights, sensitive to culture, an openness to other people's perspectives. And third is an action component, individual or collective action, or a willingness to act to advance a common good. I'll invite you to remember these 3, Because if you will look at the image on the right, it's really interesting, because if you keep seeing things about the virus recently, I would say this is very similar to the logo that I saw within one of the Forus events. Just keep that in mind. Because I'm going to revisit that in these 3 points. Remember the 3 points. One is a capacity to understand knowledge, a capacity to value human rights, and a capacity to act. So where did we learn these competencies? Again, out of the 62 respondents, and again, I'd like to thank Arturo for the survey. Our survey said, and I collected it into a word cloud. You can see experiences is the biggest, okay, in terms of the 62 respondents, but you still have elements of the school, the university, travel, movement, okay, teaching, education. And so my key argument here is, in terms of where we learn global competencies, global citizenship competencies, a lot of people will focus on the school. But while I will say that foundational lessons about global citizenship are indeed developed in the formal system, the responses here today show us that people are actually learning it or deepening it outside of the school. And so while these extracurricular activities might still be linked to the school, I really think it's important for us to recognize that much more of global citizenship education and learning is happening within the non-formal learning space, through experience, through work, through engaging with local communities and civil society organizations. I just like to call your attention. These are 4 reports that UNESCO has done in the last many years about global citizenship education. And maybe later in the chat, I'd like you to recognize, what do you notice about the cover photos? I'll leave that hanging for us in our discussion. Maybe you can answer in the chat box. Okay, so where did we learn these global competencies? Again, as I said, formal, non-formal, and even informal learning is relevant in terms of global citizenship education. The challenge is, how do we become more aware of our own global citizenship competencies, and how do we optimize the opportunities available to strengthen these competencies? In the school, I'm a teacher in the university, we give exams, okay? And so once you have the exam, then you say you pass or you fail. But I would say that active global citizenship is best demonstrated in action. And I was trying to get some pictures, so I went into the Forus website and looked at, there are different realms of action, from protest action to community work to actual training, but also online action. And so I'm saying that you who are members of Forus, you would start just to look at what you are already doing, because you will begin to find seeds of global citizenship. And finally, the third question: in what ways have you applied these competencies in your work? Okay. Again, the response is diverse in terms of around sustainability, around work, in terms of education, integrating the different elements. It's a bit harder to figure out the word cloud. So what I did was, I went into the Forus website and I said, what better way to look at these competencies than in dealing with the virus situation, in dealing with the pandemic? So this event was just held, and it was posted on the 22nd of May, so barely a week ago. And if you start again to bring together, as I said, the 3 main competencies I talked about: the capacity to identify the interrelationships in terms of global issues, the values that you have, and the action component. And I'm not sure if they're in the room at the moment with us. I know Josna actually registered, but I think what Josna shared in this forum is the example of India shows that COVID-19 situation is affecting the economic, social, environmental areas, threatening the lives of millions of people. This understanding of the relationship of the health, the economic, the social, the political dimensions, and poverty is the seed of what global citizenship understanding is about. John talked about the variety, the importance, therefore, of a legitimate civic space for civil society. This is about rights. This is about how we value, at the core is the accountability of our governments, for example. And so this aspect of the rights is present also in that conversation. But more importantly also, it's about action, okay? I'm sorry to pronounce, not to pronounce, Arlis said that CSO should advocate towards the governments for being included in digital processes, even though COVID-19 is making the high-level political forum a virtual forum. So we need to advocate actively. But what Arlis also said, I think is important. These are not three separate capacities, because in the end, the conclusion of that article, I was so pleased to see that the focus of our SDG work, the focus of our global citizenship education is actually transformation. And so with this, what do I say we are learning? We're learning to know about COVID, the virus, and how it has spread. We're learning to do about COVID is to wash our hands, to be safe in terms of distance. We're learning to live together, but more importantly, COVID should not just impact on us, but we should be transformed in society, be transformed.
Robbie,
now,
2 minutes left.
Yeah, how do we therefore deal with this now? Moments of crisis can help us to recognize that we are active global citizens, okay? But these moments of crisis should not always happen to us before we learn. What I'm going to say is we don't learn to be global citizens, we learn through global citizenship. We are global citizens, and we use the opportunity that crisis gives us to learn. So in conclusion, we cannot wait for more crisis to learn to become global citizens. When we look back from our experiences and responses, we realize it is in our experience as active civil society advocates that we learn through global citizenship. And therefore, as civil society, we are on the forefront of the opportunity to develop these competencies of active global citizenship. We don't all have to be teachers and educators, but we all need to recognize that in doing what we do, we are actually contributing to learning through global citizenship by just being active global citizens. And so what I say now is that it's not about being role models, okay? But actually, it's about engaging others to contribute, to do what we do. We are nurturing new generations of active global citizens. So I invite comments, but I actually welcome you in terms of this concept that when you start to think of global citizenship education, it's not learning for global citizenship, it's actually learning through global citizenship education. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to the conversations.
Robbie, thank you very much for an excellent overview of global citizenship education. And you have invited people to comment and to put their comments in the chat box, and we'll leave an opportunity even for verbal interventions. But we'd like to first of all play a short video about global citizenship education that has been produced by Bridge 47. So Arturo, would you mind running the short video now, please?
Because it's as natural as the air we breathe. We are born global citizens. Only before we are grown up, they told us that we are part of a nation. Global comes first, then nation, then city, then neighborhood.
Being a global citizen goes hands in hands with being a lifelong learner. In such a very diverse and rapidly changing world, we can't ignore the importance of further education, further learning to be a citizen of this world while learning how to think globally and act locally.
I think it's really important that we understand that we are all interconnected and that we in the global north dare to confront our own privilege and ask those necessary questions, because we need to do things differently if we really want to create more equality in the world.
This is exactly what global citizenship education does. It enables people to use their citizen rights in order to find a transformative pathway to change their lives, but also the lives of others towards sustainability.
Well, I think we certainly need transformative change in society. And for me, global citizenship education is one of the best ways of doing that. I think that we really need to transform the values that shape many things, many issues, many problems that we have in society. And I think that we need to move beyond communications and media as a way of doing that. For me, global citizenship education has better potential for addressing the root causes of the issues that face our communities around the world.
It captures the essence of life and the ability for people to live in equality, sustainability, and in happiness. Global citizenship education is something that needs to be woven into every sector of the society so that we'll be able to care about the next generation and bring forth people who are indeed empathetic towards the things that are important and that are relevant.
Great. Thanks very much, Arturo, for showing that video. I think it does provide a cross-sectoral view of the importance of global citizenship education and people's different understandings of what it means in their own context. So I'd like to open up now to those of you who are participating in the call who might be interested in putting a couple of questions maybe to Robbie to clarify any points he made or maybe to respond to them. So I've asked you maybe to put up your hand, to raise your hand using the Zoom option if you can, or to put your question in the chat box. So do I see anybody who would like to put a question or a comment to Robbie in response to his presentation? I'm not seeing anybody in the chat box there. Do I see anybody who's interested in responding or clarifying any point? No, I don't think so. Okay, so that's helpful. We will have opportunity for general discussion after the second speaker, but I would like now to turn to our second speaker, and our second speaker is Albin Coi from the Slovenian platform Sloga. Albin is the director of Sloga, and he is with us today to really talk about what global citizenship education has meant for his platform Sloga in the Slovenian national context. So Albin, you're very welcome. Over to you, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre, and for introducing me, and thank you for the invitation. I'm not an educator, but I'm more like an activist who's using something as a tool. So I will share my screen with you for some slides, just to have it there.
If there's any difficulty with the slides, Albin, we have some slides here that we can use for you. Great.
I hope now it works now. Is it okay?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So I will not be so comprehensive as Robbie did his part, introducing such a comprehensive concept in such a distinctive way that to grasp the importance and the dimension of the whole concept that we are dealing with here today. So, but I will offer just a short illustration why GCE is important for us as an NGO platform, or for our NGO community, or for our NGO network that is working on it. And I will try to explain what we do to achieve broader support for GCE teams' education methods and techniques. And when I say that, I always mean that we are talking about experiential participative learning for critical thinking in open space environment to enable responsible action. So it's some kind of already an activist kind of translation of that structure what Robbie offered to us. So I'm coming from Slovenia, which is ranked 12th in the world by the SDG, Bertelsmann's SDG index. And you can see the current assessment gives us that we still have some challenges remaining in our quality of education, which is SDG 4. And the trend the assessors were putting out is that we are moderately improving. But when we all know how it is with those summary indicators. So a nearer look at the methodology tell us that they consider data such as enrollment rate on primary and completion rate on lower secondary level, with some indications of science performance among students and so on. So it's quite quantitative and not so qualitative dimension of the issue. And not much is said on qualitative side, and of our formal education, nothing on non-formal and informal part. So it looks good, but if somebody would ask me if Slovenia is prepared to transformation, for more sustainable practices, I would say not really. Also because of that, because the global issues, root causes and effects of themes that we are facing today are not present enough in the public space or in formal education. So we are still focused more on local, national perspective, how to deal with issues. So, and when we are discussing the global themes as a 2 million nation, we also mainly performing kind of a one-dimensional perspective. So what we did is that we, together with Bridge 47 network, we prepared an analysis in 2019 that showed a lack of or minimum level of global dimensions included in various school programs and curricula. And although we are quite good in several dimensions that are part of the SDG 4.7, and we should remember that, like human rights, gender equality, promotion of culture of peace and nonviolence, we are much weaker on the sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, and especially global citizenship dimension. And that makes us not so capable for transformative actions that are needed to achieve goals from Agenda 2030, to have a more just, equitable world as we want. And especially these days, when we have a new government, which is more center-right, more right than center, where civic space is being attacked in a manner that I'm sure many of you are facing in also in your countries. But it's the network. It also is bringing civil society organizations back to the position of fighting for our role, for our rights, to be more proactive, going to the citizens and so on. So it's the situation that also asks us to be transformative. So as a national platform for development cooperation, global education and humanitarian aid, we are supporting many initiatives, and we try to practice what we preach. And in all the variety of NGO causes and principles, we all want to achieve lasting change according to our deep values. And we are all communicating our values through our actions, positions, protests, demands. And global citizenship education, from a methodological point of view, provides methods and techniques how to teach, how to learn about our values and how to act upon. And one value to be mentioned is solidarity. So from my point of view, the key concept, bringing people together, working for each other. And when we talk about transformative, it also includes an issue, how well we understand root causes of various inequalities we are facing today in our country or in the world. And what are the consequences of our actions, what we do through our consumption patterns, what we do through our production patterns, how we deal with power issues in the West and so on. And what can we do to strengthen those actions that we do no harm and or will not leave nobody behind. And this is something that we as an NGO community do. So as NGOs, we do learning by doing. And Slovenian Global Citizenship Education practitioners are building community of practice in the form of educators clubs to regularly exchange their experience. Our member organization is organizing a national conference, bringing everybody together, and it is not an ex cathedra event, but it's being formed by participants itself, and they're using the same tools they're using in classes, on seminars, and training. As NGOs, we do advocacy. And do focus work, we try to maintain debate alive through organizing national forum, at least biannually, bringing together educators and decision makers and policy makers to discuss how to bring more global dimensions into our formal, informal, non-formal, lifelong education, and provide political support for it. We will see what will happen in the next months according to that. As NGOs, we do networking. In between, we try to build partnerships with different institutions and bodies, recognizing the importance of those values of openness and inclusiveness, like academic institutions or National Adult Learning Institute. So there are several of them, and they are being responsive to that. And we're trying to build partnership with ministry responsible for development cooperation and Ministry of Education. And as Robbie said, you know, that the background of the whole concept and practice is lying in development education, in learning about causes of global poverty. And this is what we are addressing. Today we would say causes of inequalities. So this is what is pushing us to do more. On the other hand, what we are trying to do as a platform, as an NGO community, we try to go around key actors constantly to keep the doors open, to provide showcases, to give voice those with experiences, all to maintain the dialogue on global citizenship education. This is very important. As an NGO activist, you know that you have to be persistent. You have to be persistent at every point, fighting for what we are doing.
2 minutes.
As NGOs, we do training, and through training and information dissemination and communication stuff, we are using practices that we are learning from the global citizenship education and so on. So there are many at Bridge 47 webpage. You can find many innovative cases how to deal and how you can use different teams and different methods, so on. And you can see the link below. To end, if Deirdre, if I'm out of time already, as NGOs, we also fight against ignorance and prejudice. And this is in times of stereotyping, fear, and hate towards migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, the others, is so much important. And so for us, as said in the beginning, working on national GCE guidelines for cooperation between NGOs, ministries of foreign affairs and education to strengthen support for global education, to have this roadmap available is that, as said in the beginning, when we are talking about GCE, we mean experiential practical learning for critical thinking in open space to foster our quest for just and equitable global community, to act with the right values. So I will end here, being ready for the discussion that comes, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Albin, for what was a really grounded presentation. So we really had invited you today because we realized that global citizenship education can be very abstract. Sometimes when we're describing it, it can seem very conceptual, whereas I think what you did was you brought it back very much to the national Slovenian context. And I thought you gave some very practical ideas for how Forus members who are national platforms like your own could see themselves in their role as activists as being very much agents of promoting global citizenship education also through their national activism. So thank you for that, Albin. And I'm going to now open the floor and ask those who are participating in the call to just identify themselves, to say who they are, who they work with, and make any comments or ask any questions of either of the two speakers so far. I know my colleague Arturo is going to put some key questions now on the slides, which might help to sort of provoke our thinking and our discussion. So whenever you're ready, Arturo, if you could share those questions with us. And they might help to start our discussion today. So really, I suppose we felt that the kind of questions our discussion might cover would include maybe firstly, whether those of us who are participating in the call today recognize global citizenship education and SDG target 4.7 in our current work. So it'll be interesting for all of us to think about that. Do we think we're doing any, or are there any elements of global citizenship education in our current work? Also the question, where would you see the need for stronger links to global citizenship education in your work? And as you've heard from the speakers, it's about looking at the sort of root causes of problems. It is about an experiential dimension to learning. It's about activism. It's about values. And finally, what is needed in order to be able to create stronger links to global citizenship education in your work? What would you need to do, or what would you need more of to be able to help you to create those links with global citizenship education in your work? So I'm going to turn now to participants and see, are there any hands up? You know how to raise your hand. There's a very small button under the participants, which you can use to raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to speak, or you can put a question or a comment into the chat box. So would anybody like to be the brave one to start and to put a question to either Robbie or Albin? So I'm looking to see, can I see any hands? I don't see one at the moment. So maybe I could maybe put that first question to, yes, there is a hand.
Yeah, Roy.
Fantastic. Okay, Roy, over to you. If you could just tell us briefly who you are, who you work with, and then put your question to either or both of the speakers.
Okay, thank you very much for this. My name is Roy Olowu. I have a small outfit, a consultancy, and we work in Nigeria with teachers and schools. And what we're doing there is to try and we do a sort of continuous professional development training. And what we do there is try to encourage educators to bring in SDG, especially SDGs, the 17 goals actually. We try to ask them to bring that into mainstream teaching. So we don't present it as a subject, we present it as a principle with its principles and its concepts for teachers to apply to their subject disciplines. And one of the things that we notice is here we have global citizenship education. I go there on the platform of global education. So can any one of the two speakers just identify those two terminologies? I'd like to see that so that I'm not conflicting because they sound the same, or one sounds as a framework of the other, but I'd just like to hear from two of them.
Great, thanks very much for that question, Roy. And I'll put it to both of our speakers. So maybe I'll start with you, Robbie, if you don't mind, given that you spoke first. Would you like to take that, Roy's question?
Yeah, one of the things that's happening now, particularly around the the search for a transformative education to address the problems we have in our world is what some colleagues in the environment movement have called adjectival education. So you can call it global education, you can call it women's education, you can call it environment education. Okay, and so it becomes more adjectival in terms of the topic and the entry point. At the heart, I think, of looking for a transformative education paradigm is, again, purpose. Okay, so much of the subject areas, and Roy, you asked me this question, much of the people talk about subject area as content. I think the kind of learning that's focused in global citizenship education is content that is lived and acted on. And so if I'm, because I'm not familiar with global education, because in the same way with development education. So if you start to look at it, start to look at what are the core principles. And you will find that there are a lot of core principles that are shared with this kind of, we are searching for an education paradigm that will not bring us more problems, but help us find a way out of these problems. And so my suggestion is look at the core principles. And if they are shared, it's not the terminology that matters, but what's at the heart of this, that for me, that matters.
Great.
Thanks, Roy.
Thank you very much, Robbie. Albin, would you like to add anything to what Robbie has said?
Thank you, Deirdre. Maybe just an observation that what we are facing also when we are coming into schools and or when we are dealing on a national level with
if you could just speak up a little bit, Albin, you're not so easy to hear.
Is it better?
That's better.
Yeah, okay. It's that what we are noticing when we are in discussion with professional educators or with institutions behind is that we are facing whenever we are talking about education and trying to transform the formal education, at least and I think that applies to everybody or to every country in the world, is that we are facing very normative field where institutions have a long-standing history with a very normativized, I don't know if that's an English word, but everything is being normed in this circles, you know, even what teachers have to do and how to do it and whatever and so on and so on. And even if in Slovenian case is the case that it is teachers' right and autonomy to choose the methods and techniques how to teach children, this doesn't bring, I would say, enough innovation spirit everywhere. So it's something that we, when we are talking about sustainable development education or global education or development education, is that we are facing the world that is quite different as it was 30 years ago, facing new challenges today. And we can, at least from my experience, is that there are many things changed into better. And it's coming, here it's coming, the notion that you have to be persistent with bringing up your core values and presenting it to them. And then the community of practitioners starts to grow. And yeah. In time, there will be a critical mass that will enable even more transformation. And this is, I think, very similar to what we as activists are doing. So keep up with what we are doing.
Great. Thank you for that encouragement, or those encouraging remarks, Albin. So I see another comment that Robbie has put into the chat box. I think it would be worth addressing. So Robbie, you're sharing a question. You said, somebody asked you, is global citizenship a way of life rather than a subject? So would you like to share, Robbie, your response to that question with us? Is it a way of life rather than a subject?
I think, as I said, it's in schools, the problem we have is schools still work around subjects. And once you make it a subject in school, it compartmentalizes it. And as I said, at the heart of global citizenship education is an integrated, holistic awareness of the social, political, economic, cultural, and health aspects, for example. And so this is a way of life. In a sense, it's a way of thinking, but also it's a way of doing, and it's a way of living. In the same way, sustainability. Sustainability can be a subject in school, but when you start to live it, it becomes beyond a subject area. And so I think this distinction, I think, is very important in the sense that, as I said, when we look at global citizenship education, and as the people in the survey have responded, much more of that really is learned not in schools. And so by putting it in schools, you actually, there's the danger of making it a subject. And so I can pass the subject, okay? And if just to remember I showed you the photographs. I don't know if I can show the photographs because I think this is the time to address this. Can I share my screen again?
Sure.
Will I be allowed? Yep, just in terms of, if you look at the photographs that I showed earlier, I don't know, is my screen being shared?
Arturo, can you just facilitate the screen share?
Yes, Robbie, you can go ahead and share your screen now.
Okay, I'm sharing my video, but the screen. Okay, if you look at these reports, and as I said, they're all UNESCO reports, okay? You will notice it's all children. And for me, a lot of the work in global citizenship education has been focused on children. And this is where so I'm so happy to speak to people in civil society. No, this is not just about children. This is as much about adults as well. And therefore, it's not only in schools. So yes, if it can be a subject in school, by all means, yes, we would have it. But at the same time, even when you start to look at successful global citizenship education programs in schools, they usually are successful because they work with NGOs. They work with civil society organizations. They take their children out to the community. And so this is the real kind, and as Albin was saying, this is the participative, experiential kind of learning, which is transformative, not just of the individual, because this is not the point of global citizenship education, not just transformation of the individual, it's also transformation of the very problems that we see. And so it's an ongoing process. That's why I say, yes, it's not a lifestyle, it's a way of living, because it's not an end point. Okay, global citizenship education is not an endpoint. It's an ongoing journey because we continue. As we change and address the issues, new things come up. But at least I think it's really important to also not to forget to celebrate, because sometimes you say, oh, it's an ongoing journey, it will never end. No, we need to learn to celebrate, because that's part of the acknowledgement. That's part of learning. We should celebrate learning. And often we're just tested for learning. I think, and so I tell my students, when I give you a mark, I'm only marking the piece of paper you gave me. That's not how much you learn, because I can never capture all of that in a piece of paper. And so, yes, it's a way of life, but also it's about transforming our own lives. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robbie. That was a very inspiring answer. I see there's been another question put into the chat box, which I'm going to put to Albin. And that is from Humbandre in Nepal. What can some concrete actions to promote global citizenship education at national level be? So if you could give us 2 or 3 key actions, concrete actions, Albin, that could promote global citizenship education at a national level, which you kind of did in your presentation, but if you just want to pick those out and highlight them for us.
Everything started already, at least from Slovenia 15 years ago, or something like that.
A little closer to your microphone, Albin, sorry.
It's hard to do it closer. Is it better now?
Much better, okay. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. It depends. It depends on the local conditions, what would work. And it's hard to say what works in Nepal, although I was there, I think, in 2018, working with their NGO Confederation and with Forus on where we had a lot of practical learning to support our networking work. So what my suggestion would be is that first of all, identify who works on global education issues in your vicinity, bring them together, form a working group, create a program on national level to get key players into communication, organize and start to organize learning events. So that's for the beginning. And what we reached after many years of work is that, for example, we reached that 2 years ago, the Global Citizenship Education, or Global Education as we call it in Slovenia, is considered one of the priorities of our development cooperation policy on national level, so signed by the Parliament. And that also pushed us to organize, to co-organize with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Education a national forum, bringing together the key players. So, and then after 1.5 years of further organizing and networking and advocating for it, in February this year we reached a very clear agreement to work all together to foster global citizenship education, even in informal education. So it's a variety of reasons why we did that, and it will depend on local conditions, as I said in the beginning. But this is the way, as usually, you know, if you find the idea something that is worth to fight for, you organize. That's what people do.
Thanks very much, Albin. That was a very good response. I think what we will do now is, I think we'll probably conclude the questions. I know that we're keen to administer another poll to see what changes in your understanding and your confidence have taken place since the beginning of this webinar today. I'd like to, before we move on to the poll, I'd like to thank both of our speakers really for very engaging, interesting and stimulating presentations. And we will be sharing details afterwards of their slides and their presentations, and also contact details if any of you wish to follow up and to put any further questions to them. So the poll we want to put to you now at the end of this webinar has 3 questions in it. And again, it's very simple to complete. So it's on your screen now in front of you. So we would just ask you, please, to tick the that corresponds to your response for the 3 questions and then submit it. And that will help us to get some sense of whether what you've heard and participated in now during the webinar has made a difference to your confidence and to your understanding of global citizenship education. So we'll just give you a minute or 2 to complete the poll and to submit it. And then I'm going to just say a little bit to you about the evaluation of today's webinar, and then I'm going to bring Ricarda in to talk about the next webinars being organised by Bridge 47. So I hope everybody's finished at this stage, completing the poll. So Arturo, maybe if we can say now that the time for completing the poll is almost up, and Arturo will then provide us with a very quick breakdown of the responses to the poll questions. So when you're ready, Arturo, if you could present us with a brief diagram just indicating whether there's been any shift, any change in people's, what did the poll results show us? So on a scale of 1, not very confident, to 5, very confident, how confident are you about your understanding of the SDGs? So 3, a score of 3 was given by 27% of participants. A score of 4 was given by 45%, so that's pretty good. 4 is, I think it was 3 the last time, which was hovering around the middle. So 4 is definitely an increase in confidence. And 5, actually, we have 27% of participants saying that they feel very confident in their understanding of global citizenship education. Our second question then was on a scale of 1 to 5, not very confident, and up to 5, which is very confident. How would you feel about creating links to SDG 4.7 or global citizenship education in your work? So do we have responses to that? We do. Oh, very good. Again, I see a shift upwards. So we have 32% of our participants giving a score of 3, so moderately confident. We have 56% of participants saying that they would be, if they would give it a score of 4, which is pretty confident, and then 18% giving it a score of 5. So perhaps that response there is showing us that people may, I mean, even though there's been a very definite improvement and an increase in confidence, that maybe the sort of practical implementation or the creating links between global citizenship education and your work is an area that maybe we could concentrate a little bit more on in future webinars. And then the third question, would you be interested in participating in online training workshop on SDG 4.7 following this webinar? So we have 64% of our participants today saying yes, they would like to participate in a follow-up webinar. We have 5% saying no, and we have 32% saying possibly. So I think we'll take that as an encouraging figure. 64% is certainly a majority, so I think we feel very encouraged by that. So thank you for responding to the poll today, and I'm now going to ask Ricarda to tell us a little bit about upcoming webinars being organised by Bridge 47 and any future activities related to it. So over to you, Ricarda.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. Also, thanks for facilitating this session today, Deirdre. Yes, we are very happy to welcome you to our next Bridge 47 webinar, which focuses on the topic of COVID-19. And we are asking, so if this is actually now a momentum for transformative education and systemic change. So we're putting the question out there, and we would like to discuss with you how actually educational work and as well as activism make an contribution to dealing with, but also learning from the crisis. So we have 2 speakers there again as well. So one of my colleagues from Bridge 47 from Germany, Venro Tim Holthoff, and again, the Vice President of ICAE, the International Council for Adult Education, Shemaine Barrett, and she's also working at the University of Technology of Jamaica, and they will be sharing their views and experiences in this regard with us. So registration is open already, and we would be very, very happy to welcome you again on the 10th of June. And we would like to switch now to the next slide, Arturo. Thanks so much. We invite you to become part of our story. So yes, join us at the Bridge 47 network so you can become a member there. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. Follow us on all means of social media. And finally, also from my side, I would like to say thank you to our 2 speakers, Albin and Robbie. It was such a pleasure listening to you. Both of them are also the steering group members of Bridge 47, and you can see what passion they are bringing to our network. And yes, thank you so much. Then I'm handing over to Deirdre.
Great, Ricarda, thank you very much. And we are now drawing to the end of our webinar today. So as well as thanking the speakers, which I'd like to join you in for the excellent presentations, I'd also like to thank all of the participants who've taken part and have stayed with us during the webinar. I would like to ask you, we have a short evaluation form, which we will share with you in the chat box. Arturo, if you could just drop it into the chat box there, the link to it's an online evaluation form, and we would strongly encourage you to fill it out before you leave the call if you can. And just to say to you that there will be, as Ricarda has said, follow-up webinars to this. Certainly from Forus's point of view, we're very interested in exploring the extent to which Forus members can also embrace target 4.7 of the SDGs in their work. So we'll be continuing this collaboration with Bridge 47, and I believe that for our next General Assembly we may have more further collaboration with Bridge 47 when we finally get around to having our General Assembly. It's been delayed slightly because of the COVID pandemic this year, but we look forward very much to close collaboration with Bridge 47 when we eventually do organise it. So thank you all again for participating today. I can see that the link to the evaluation form is in the chat box, so please do click on it and complete it quickly. It's always good to get it out of the way before you finish an event, because I know myself, despite my best intentions, I may intend to fill the evaluation form out afterwards, but I very often get distracted and forget to. So for those of you who've been with us through the webinar today and benefited from the experience and the insights of our speakers and each other, please do fill out the evaluation form before you leave the call. So, you know, at that, I think we have probably completed all that we wanted to say today. And just to say to all of you, please do go forward, carry the information and the enthusiasm that we've shared with you today for global citizenship education with you in your work, and do try and find opportunities to make those links and to start thinking about your work, not just in a local and a national context, if that's what you're doing at the moment, but also to think about the global aspect of it, and to help the others that are working with you as well to also develop that kind of global awareness and global consciousness, so that we can all together transform our world in a better direction. So thank you for participating today, and we look forward to meeting you again in future webinars. Bye everybody.
Thank you very much. It's Robbie here. All the best. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye,
Thanks
Roberto. Bye, everybody.
Forus and Bridge.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.